Hi everybody, TJ Mack of Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here, and in today's video I'm going to show off four new pickups to my collection, but before I do that I'm going to talk a little bit about Robin Roberts. I have three cards from my collection here of his, from 61, 62, and 63 Topps. And what's interesting about the 62 Topps card though is that it says that he played for the New York Yankees on the bottom of the card, and I'll pan in a little bit more on that. And actually, Roberts never played a regular season game with the Yankees. The backstory behind this is that on January 19th, 1962, the Yankees announced that they had signed Robin Roberts. Now, it was an interesting move since Roberts, who won 234 games with the Philadelphia Phillies, had only one win and 10 losses with a 5.85 ERA in 1961. Now, Roberts, who you can make a case was the best pitcher of the 1950s, was at a loss in explaining his 61 season. I don't know whether it was the arm or the head that bothered me last season, he explained. I couldn't explain my success when I was successful, so I don't know if I can explain my failure. Despite his inability to explain his success and then his lack of success, Roberts was confident that he could help the Yankees in 1962. When Roberts arrived to spring training, Yankees pitching coach Johnny Sain, who I think is one of the best pitching coaches ever, commented, "I think the big fellow will help us, and everybody from the National League tells me he still can be a fine player with a good club behind him." Now, Roberts had a decent spring that year, but Yankees general manager Roy Hamey and manager Ralph Houck explained that they were pretty pitching heavy, which I think is a dangerous thought sometimes, as you'll find out in 1964 when the Yankees were in the World Series and they were running out of pitchers after Whitey Ford got hurt in Game 1. But anyway, they thought that they can get rid of Robin Yount for that reason. And Yount was very dejected by that. He was upset also that the Mets, who would go on to lose 120 games in 1962, never even considered signing him. And Gene Mauch, who was his manager in 1961 with the Phillies, was blunt in his assessment of Robin Roberts when he said, "Robbie can't even throw his fastball past your Aunt Matilda." Now, Roberts finally signed with the Baltimore Orioles, as you can see here in his 1963 Topps card, on May 22nd. And he found success in Baltimore. He had 2 seasons over the next 4 years where he pitched over 200 innings, 3 seasons when his ERA was under 3.0. And as I mentioned, in 1964, when the Yankees went to the World Series and Whitey Ford got hurt in Game 1, Robin Roberts was 13-7 that year with a 2.91 ERA with the Orioles. Now imagine if the Yankees would have had him in that series that the Yankees ended up losing in 7 games. Pretty interesting to speculate, but goes to show you, like I said, that you never can say you have too much pitching in baseball because it's such a needed commodity. But these are 3 beautiful examples of Robin Roberts cards, and I'm just a big fan of his. I think he is a guy that his cards are still pretty affordable in comparison to some of the other big-time pitchers of that era. Here we have 2 recent baseball additions to my collection. I'm continuing to work on my Dave Parker run of cards with the Pirates. This is the 77 Topps, and just this is his first year when he won the batting title. I think he had a 339 average that year, so it was his first of 2 batting titles. And he had a big year in 75 when he finished 3rd in the MVP. But I think it was around this time and in 77 and 78 where you can make a case that he may have been the best player in baseball, if not one of the top 3 or 4 best players. And 77 Topps is a very nice set. I like the thin borders on it. It gives you enough nice amount of space for the picture of the player. And just a standard green back there. Nice design, and the yellow goes nice with the helmet and striping on his jersey. And then next to him you got Mickey Lolich, who's one of the best pitchers in my view in the later part of the 60s. Outdueled Bob Gibson in the 68 World Series in Game 7. And he's got his 10-gallon hat on there, as you can see. It's just resting on top of his head, like the backs on these 66 Topps cards. And Lolich's cards can be pretty cheap. I mean, I think this card might have cost me $14 or $15 shipped. Just a nice example of this card with the yellow on it as well. I'm a fan of the 66 Topps set. 2 recent football additions. The one here in 1950 Bowman is a Paul Salata. I'm a big fan of the art cards, as you know, and this is just a nice image of him. He's a wide receiver with the 49ers and the Colts. He only played a couple seasons, actually 3 from 49 to 51. Didn't have anything special about his career per se. But besides admiring the beauty of this card, I just like the image, and then you got the shadows of the players in the background. Just a lot of creative imagery in the 50 Bowman set. I'll flip the back over for you real quick. Pretty plain back. Just tells you a little bit about the player. But what's interesting about Salata, and there's a lot of these kinds of stories in this set for whatever reason, is he was the person who created the term Mr. Irrelevant, and he had a Mr. Irrelevant award that was given to the last selection of the NFL draft. And I think this is particularly interesting since Brock Purdy, the 49ers rookie quarterback, who led them into the playoffs and, of course, lost this past weekend in the NFC Championship game. He was a Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last pick in the draft in 2022, and he's already experienced more success than any other Mr. Irrelevant has. And Salata created the Mr. Irrelevant Award in 1976, and the player and his family were invited to spend the week in Orange County enjoying activities, including a trip to Disneyland and then a golf tournament. And the honoree also received what was called the Lozman Trophy, depicting a player fumbling a football. And Kelvin Kirk of Dayton University was the first player to be given the title as the 487th pick in 1976. There's an interesting story. A relevant week generated so much publicity that in 1979, the Los Angeles Rams, who owned the next to last pick, intentionally passed to let the Steelers, with the last pick, choose first. Pittsburgh also wanted a publicity of having Mr. Irrelevant and passed on it as well. Both teams refused to choose a player until Commissioner Pete Rozelle forced them to pick, with the Steelers winning. That led the so-called Salata rule, which bars teams from passing to get the final selection. So, interesting player that maybe didn't do much on the field, but in football history now has made quite a name for himself. And next to him, I added this 1975 Topps Harold Carmichael. He's a player, Hall of Famer with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was 6'7" or 6'8", depending on what you were reading. Just a big target. Great receiver of the 1970s. I was glad to see him get in the Hall of Fame. And I've been adding a lot of 75 Topps cards to my collection. It's one of my favorite sets. And there's the back of the card, picking a football field with the player's information on a scoreboard there. And this is just a nice example of a second-year Carmichael. So that's all I have for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week and weekend.